to buy a home. Jerry.
Yes.
A buyer calls you, never purchased a home before, and usually they have a lot of questions, and they're going to ask, oh, what's the process? What's the steps? How do I buy a home? What do you say?
I'm going to go back to the basics. I'm going to start with, first of all, how much money do you have to buy a house? I'm going to start there. Nowadays, unlike before, you have to have a little bit of skin in the game. You have to have a down payment. 3.5% is kind of a typical for an FHA buyer, which is designed for a first-time home buyer. But if they were a veteran, it's 0%. They don't have to have a down payment.
VA, using a VA loan, there's no down payment.
No, that's how I kind of look at it, is try to figure out, one, a lot of questions of what they've done to research it, what they've started with, and then I'm going to kind of get into the process of, well, let's figure out, what do you qualify for? What does it look like? We're going to figure out a lender. Have you talked to a lender? And then try to go down that road. What do you tell them when they call you?
Usually you got to find out, okay, what kind of finances do they have? Are they in order? They got to have a credit history. They need to be able to afford a house. So what's going to be a comfortable payment? And a lot of that's going to determine what type of loan program they go with.
One of the biggest issues out there is that buyers will talk themselves out of buying a house without ever talking to anybody.
Oh, absolutely. I think of my first experience when I bought a house. I thought the same thing. I'm like, I can't really afford a down payment and the monthly payment and then the closing costs. We didn't discuss that, but that's another added cost to a buyer, which could be about 3% of the sales price, roughly. But I didn't realize until I spoke with a realtor. He said, well, there's a strong chance I can negotiate to get the seller to cover that closing cost. You have the down payment, the 3.5%, but you don't have the additional 3% for the closing cost. So talking to the realtor, he was able to say, hey, there's a strong chance I can negotiate that and you won't have to pay that.
I know as a realtor, when a first-time home buyer calls me and says, hey, I don't know how much it costs to buy a house or what's the process, whether it's one of my kids' friends or somebody I've coached in the past, my thing is, let's just figure out where you're at. Like you said, credit. A lot of them don't even know, do I have credit?
First thing we do with a buyer who's never purchased a home and wants to buy a home is we put them in touch with the lender, right? And the lender will help them determine what kind of credit score they have, what their debt to income ratios are, and what they can afford in terms of a monthly payment. And then that will kind of determine what type of loan program they're going to use. And so that's one of the usually the first things we'll do when a buyer will call a realtor. We'll help them through that. We'll give them a trusted lender that we work with. You and I both been using pretty much the same lenders for the last 20 years. First-time home buyers, I love working with. They're probably my favorite to work with because they're always asking a lot of questions. They don't understand the process. So it gives us a really great opportunity to sit down, educate, teach them, explain the process of what we do and how it works.
What are closing costs, John?
Closing costs is, as I said, it will be anywhere from 2 to possibly 3% of the sales price. And those closing costs, we used to refer to them as junk fees. That was the loan officer fees, the doc fees, the prep and all that stuff. They called them junk fees. They don't call them that anymore, but they're just closing cost fees that the buyer will incur.
And then you have escrow fees.
The title company will be the third-party mediator that brings the buyer and the seller together, processes all the paperwork, runs the title report, the commitments. They go through the whole process. Then they charge a fee to both the buyer and seller. So that is your escrow fee.
And that's generally split even.
It's the same between buyer and seller.
Oh, don't forget, we got to pay the county
taxes
and to record it. We got to change it from one name to the other. They charge you a fee to buyer and seller.
Reconveyance fee. It's taking it out of the seller's name and paying off the loan and putting it in the buyer's name.
So again, when I'm sitting down and you're trying to explain the money you needed to buy a house, it's not just down payment. It's not just closing costs. You mentioned home inspection.
So the buyer is entitled to do their due diligence period. They can investigate if there's radon gas. They can do a roof inspection, pool inspection, or a general home inspection. So this is another cost to the buyer that it's typically around $500-600.
Right.
in addition to that, they also have the appraisal fee. So if they're doing a loan, they're going to get an appraisal done on that property, and that's typically $500-600 as well. So there's more.
So I like to sit with my buyers and kind of show them a whole spreadsheet and just let them see it, because there's a lot of people, when we're explaining this, it doesn't make sense. But then when you put it in writing and they see it, they go, oh, okay, I understand now.
So this is part of the process you do with the first a home buyer, right?
And I do it throughout. Yeah.
You're breaking down the whole process. I mean, you've got earnest deposit, down payment, closing cost, inspections cost, appraisal cost.
This could be a 2-day conversation with everything involved in buying a house. There's so much involved. Contract alone is like 13 pages with the cover sheet. That doesn't include any addendums. You get a title report, that could be over 100 pages. You have CC&Rs, which everybody goes, what are CC&Rs? So what I like to do with the new home buyer is meet and then set the expectation for the next thing. And I always just try to simplify it by what's the next 3 things that are going to happen. So they're not having to concentrate on the 1,000 things. That's my job. Just the next 3 things.
So as a first-time home buyer, you'll see that there is a lot to know and a lot that you'll need to do and be required of you. But
Yeah.
as an agent, what are you saying?
Let me hold your hand. Let's sit down. We're going to go through this together. And I'm your coach. I'm going to educate you. I'm going to train you. And we're going to get through it. And we're going to do the right steps.